Mira Alcott did not raise her voice when the porcelain shattered at her feet. She did not step back. She did not look up at the woman standing on the landing above her, whose hand was still open from the throwing. She only knelt, gathered the largest pieces into the flat of her apron, and set them on the silver tray she had been carrying. The tea had soaked the hem of her dress. The sugar had scattered like small hail across the marble. She counted the pieces without meaning to. 9, a cup, a saucer, and 7 fragments too small to name. "Get this maid out of my house," the mistress screamed. "Get her out before I have her thrown out." The other servants stood very still along the corridor, the under-butler with the coal scuttle, the 2 housemaids with their linen baskets, the old cook with flour still on her wrists. None of them moved. None of them spoke. They had learned in the 4 years since Camilla Ashford had come to Renfield Hall as its new wife that stillness cost less than sympathy. Mira rose. She wiped her palm once against her apron and folded her hands in front of her. She did not look at the woman on the landing. She looked instead at the man in the doorway of the library, who had come out at the sound of breakage and stopped where he was. He was not tall in the way portraits demand. He was compact and plain-featured, and his eyes were the exact colour of wet slate. He was looking at her, not at his wife, at her hands, and then at her face, and then at the scattered sugar between them. His name was Elias Renford. He owned every acre from the river to the ridge and the mills that stood on both. He had not spoken to a servant in the corridor in 9 months. "I asked you a question, Elias," Camilla said. "I asked whether you intend to do anything at all." He did not answer her. He walked forward instead, and the sugar cracked faintly under his boots, and he stopped a pace from Mira and looked down at the tray she still held. "You are hurt," he said. She had not noticed the blood on the side of her thumb. She turned her hand a fraction and saw the thin red line where a shard had caught her when she gathered it. She lowered her hand again. "It is nothing, sir," she said. "It is not nothing," he said. "Go to the kitchen. Have Mrs. Falk bind it. Then come to the library." Above them, on the landing, Camilla Ashford went completely still. The county called her the loveliest woman east of the river. They called her the Mistress of Renfield. They said she had married up and kept the ledger of every step she had climbed. She had never once been overruled by her husband in front of the household. The dateline was the autumn of 1849, in the low green country between the Blue Ridge foothills and the tidewater, where the great houses still ran on paper and paper still ran on trust. If her first hour has your heart already, subscribe to the channel so you can walk the whole road with her. Mira Alcott had come to Renfield Hall as a bookkeeper's assistant when she was 17 years old. She was 24 now. In the 7 years between, she had learned every column of every ledger in the estate office, and she had learned them because the old bookkeeper, a gentleman named Josiah Penn, had gone half-blind in his last 2 years, and had let her read the numbers aloud to him while he verified them from memory. When Josiah Penn died in the spring of the year Elias Renford married Camilla Ashford, no one had thought to ask Mira what she knew. The new mistress had decided, within a week of her arrival, that a young woman who could read a ledger better than most men could was a threat, and had ordered her demoted to housework. Mira had been given a grey dress, and a linen cap, and a place in the scullery, and had accepted the demotion without argument, because she needed the wage, and because she had understood, from the first hour, that Camilla Ashford was afraid of her. She had not stopped reading the ledgers. She had simply stopped being seen doing it. She dusted the estate office twice a week. She wiped the desks. She turned pages while she wiped. She had a memory that held columns the way other people held tunes, and she had, for 4 years, been watching a slow thin thread of money leave Renfield Hall by a route no one else had thought to look at. The new steward, a man named Rennick, had come with Camilla from her father's household. He kept the outer ledgers now. His hand was neat. His sums were correct. His sums had always been correct. It was the underlying entries that were not, and Mira had known this for 19 months. She had told no one. She had not been asked. She was thinking of this as she followed Mrs. Folk into the kitchen and let the old cook wrap a strip of clean linen around her thumb. Mrs. Folk did not speak while she worked. She only tied the knot too tight, and then loosened it and tied it again. "He wants me in the library," Mira said. "I heard," said Mrs. Folk. "I do not know what for." "You do," said Mrs. Folk. She finished the knot and set Mira's hand down on the table, as if it were a piece of china she did not trust. "Hold your head up." Mira went. The library at Renfield Hall was a long room with a coal fire at the far end and a wall of books that had been chosen by Elias Renford's father and never rearranged. Elias was standing at the window when she entered. He did not turn. "Close the door," he said. She closed it. "Sit down." She did not sit. He waited a moment and then turned and looked at where she was standing and did not press it. "How long have you worked in this house?" he said. 7 years, sir. In what capacity?" "For 3 years bookkeeper's assistant. For 4 years housemaid. Why the change?" She considered the shape of the truthful answer and the shape of the useful one. She gave him the truthful one because she had already decided, in the corridor, that she would not lie to him again. "Mrs. Renford preferred it," she said. His face did not change. She had expected some flicker. There was none. "Sit down, Miss Alcott." She sat. It was the first time in 4 years anyone in the house had called her Miss Alcott. She felt the syllables land somewhere under her collarbone and pressed her hands flat against her knees to keep them steady. "My wife," he said, "believes I do not notice things. She is largely correct. I have been a poor master of this house since my brother died. I do not intend to continue being one." She said nothing. "Rennick brought me the quarterly summary last week," he said. "I have been reading it every evening since. I do not understand it. It is a summary, sir. It is not meant to be understood. It is meant to be believed." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he came and sat on the corner of the desk across from her and folded his arms. "Explain. A summary shows what a steward wishes his master to see. It does not show the entries beneath. If the entries beneath are wrong, the summary is still correct on its own terms. And are the entries beneath wrong?" "Yes, sir." He did not move. He did not ask how she knew. He waited. "For 19 months, she said, the estate has paid a supplier called Marden and Sons for hemp cordage, tar, and mill timber. The invoices are handwritten, the quantities are plausible. The prices are within 2% of market. The signatures on the receipts are Mr. Rennick's, and the goods are logged into the mill inventory in the correct week. Everything reconciles. Then what is wrong? Marden and Sons is not a firm. There is no such supplier in the county register. The address on the invoices is a boarding house in Fredericksburg. The cordage and tar we use come from Beale and Company, as they have for 11 years, and the timber comes from the pool yard on the river. Marden and Sons is a name on a piece of paper. The money leaves the estate and does not return as goods. How much? $4,312 over 19 months. 8% of the mill's operating account. Never enough in one quarter to draw the eye. Consistent enough across quarters to compound. He was very still. "You have the invoices," he said. "I have copies of every one. I have made them at night from the office ledgers on paper I bought with my own wage. They are in a tin box under the floor of my room. I have the boarding house address in Fredericksburg and the name of the woman who signs for the mail there. I have not been to see her. I did not think it my place. Why did you not bring this to me before now?" "Because I was a housemaid, sir, and because I did not know whether you would believe me over Mr. Rennick, and if you did not, I would lose my place and my copies would be burned, and nothing would change. And you think I will believe you now? I think you may. I do not require it." He almost smiled. It was the barest thing at the corner of his mouth, a ghost of a movement that was gone before she was sure she had seen it. Then it was gone entirely, and his face was plain again. "Bring me the box," he said. "Tonight, after the house is asleep, use the back stair. Do not speak of this to Mrs. Falk. Do not speak of it to anyone." "Yes, sir, and Miss Alcott." She waited. "You will not be dismissed tonight, whatever my wife says at supper. You will not be dismissed." "Thank you, sir. That is not a kindness. That is an instruction to you and a warning to her. Do you understand the difference?" Yes, sir, she understood the difference. She had lived in the difference for 7 years. She rose, and she left the library, and she went back down the servants' stair with her thumb bound and her spine composed, and she did not allow herself to think, until she was in the scullery again, with a paring knife in her hand and a bowl of onions in front of her, that the man upstairs had said her name as if it were a name and not a station. Supper at Renfield Hall was served at 7, and Camilla Ashford descended the main staircase at 10 past, in dark green silk, with her hair pinned high and her mouth set. She did not look at the servants along the wall. She looked at her husband, who was already seated at the head of the long table, and she did not sit until he rose to draw her chair. "You made a spectacle of me this afternoon," she said, once the doors were closed and only the footman by the sideboard remained. "I made no spectacle. You did. That girl broke a cup. You threw a cup. She caught the pieces. You corrected me in front of the household. I asked a bleeding woman to have her hand bound. That is not a correction. That is a courtesy. You went further than that. I did." She waited. He did not fill the silence. It was, she realized, the first evening in a year that he had not filled the silence for her. She reached for her wine and set it down again without drinking. "I want her out of this house by morning," she said. No, the word landed between them like a coin dropped on stone. She stared at him. He was cutting his meat. "No," he said again, without looking up. "Miss Alcott stays. She will not be assigned to the scullery any longer. Beginning tomorrow, she will resume her post in the estate office, under my direct supervision. Her wage will be adjusted to the rate of a bookkeeper. I will inform Mr. Rennick in the morning." Camilla's hand closed around the stem of her glass and did not release. "You cannot be serious. I am generally serious. You have observed this. She is a scullery maid. She was a scullery maid, because you made her one. She was a bookkeeper before that. She is one again from tomorrow. You will humiliate me. I will do nothing of the kind. You will humiliate yourself if you make an occasion of it. I suggest you do not." She sat very straight and very still. Her colour had gone from her face and returned to it in patches. When she spoke again her voice was low, and even and Mira, who was not in the room, but who would hear it recounted almost word for word by the footman before the night was out, would understand at once that she had made an enemy who did not know yet how to fight back, and would therefore fight in every direction at once. "You will regret this, Elias." "I have regretted many things. I will add it to the list if required." He set down his knife. He looked at her. He had, in fact, been noticing things for some months. He had noticed the new dresses without new invoices. He had noticed the closed door of her sitting room in the afternoons when Rennick was known to be at the mill. He had noticed a tone in the steward's voice that a man used with a confederate, not a superior. He had not been ready to act upon what he had noticed. He was ready now. "Eat your supper," he said. "It grows cold." She did not eat. She rose. She walked the length of the room and paused at the doors and turned. "I will not sleep under a roof that houses that woman as an equal," she said. "Then you may sleep at your father's," he said. "It is a short ride. I will have a carriage brought." She left. She did not slam the door. She had been raised too well for that. She closed it with a precision that was more insulting than a slam would have been, and she went upstairs, and within an hour the sound of a trunk being dragged across a bedroom floor could be heard from the servants' hall. Mira did not hear the trunk. She heard, from Mrs. Falk, only that the mistress had gone to bed early, and that Mr. Renford had asked for coffee in the library at 11. She brought the tin box to him at 11, up the back stair, with a shawl over her arm to hide it. She set it on his desk, and opened it, and laid the papers out in the order she had assembled them. He read for an hour without speaking. She stood at the window and watched the moon come up over the mill roof, and did not interrupt him. "You have taught yourself all of this," he said finally. "Mr. Penn taught me the accounts. The rest I read." "Where your library, sir, at night?" "I put the books back where I found them." He looked up at her. His face was tired and clear. "Miss Alcott, I owe you an apology I have not yet earned the right to offer. I will earn it. In the meantime, do not leave this house." "I had not planned to, sir, even if my wife makes it difficult. Especially then." He almost smiled again. This one held a fraction longer than the first. By the following night, Camilla Ashford had done what Mira had known she would do. She had gone to her father's house in the county seat, and she had told him a version of the day's events, and her father, a florid magistrate named Judge Bellwood Ashford, who had spent 30 years being agreed with, had ridden out to Renfield Hall the next afternoon in a carriage with the family crest on the door. He had asked to see his son-in-law in the library. He had shut the door behind him and had spoken for 11 minutes without pause. Elias had heard him out, and had, at the end, said only that his wife was welcome to return whenever she wished, and that Miss Alcott would remain in the estate office, and that the matter was not open to further discussion. The judge left in a colour that suggested apoplexy, and drove back to town to consult his lawyer and his allies. Mira was in the estate office when he departed. She was reading the current quarter's summary alongside the underlying entries and marking, with a pencil so soft it left no impression, the invoices she believed Rennick had drawn against Marden and Sons in the previous 6 weeks. She heard the carriage go. She did not look up. Rennick came in an hour later. He was a thin, careful man of 40 with sandy hair going grey at the temples, and a habit of clearing his throat before he spoke. "Miss Alcott," he said. "Mr. Rennick, I am given to understand that you have been reassigned to this office. You are given to understand correctly. On whose authority?" "Mr. Renford's." He looked at her for a long moment. She met his look and did not blink. She had never before in her life been in a room alone with him. She had passed him in corridors. She had brought him tea once in her old post. She had watched his hand across a ledger and had learned it as one learns a face. "I do not require an assistant," he said. "I have not been appointed as your assistant. I have been appointed as bookkeeper." "Mr. Renford will explain the division of duties. I am here to reconcile the mill accounts against the underlying invoices." He has asked for a report by the end of the month. He did not move for several seconds. Then he crossed to his own desk and sat down and drew a ledger toward him and opened it at a page he did not intend to read. His colour was very high. She had expected him to be composed. She saw now that he had not expected to be caught, and had no plan for it, and she understood, with a small cold clarity, that he was going to make a mistake in the next fortnight, and that the mistake would be large. She was wrong about the fortnight. He made the mistake that night. At 2 a.m, a lamp went on in the estate office. Mira, who had not been sleeping, and whose room was above the office by only 1 floor, heard the faint scrape of a key in the outer door, and then the softer scrape of a drawer being opened. She rose. She dressed. She went down the back stair in her stocking feet, with her boots in her hand, and stopped in the passage outside the office door. Rennick was inside. He was pulling out the current ledger and the previous 3/4 ledgers, and he was stacking them on the desk beside a satchel. The satchel was empty. He meant to fill it and go. She stepped into the doorway. "Mr. Rennick," she said quietly. He turned so fast the lamp guttered. His hand went to his coat. She held up both of her own hands, palms open. "I have no wish to raise the house," she said. "Put the ledgers back. Go to your room. In the morning you may present yourself to Mr. Renford and offer whatever account you choose. If you take those books tonight, you will be a thief pursued through 3 counties by nightfall tomorrow. If you leave them, you will be a man with a difficult conversation ahead of him. There is a difference." He stared at her. His hand was still on his coat. She did not know whether he was reaching for a pistol or for a handkerchief, and she did not intend to find out. "You will not raise the house," he said. "I will not need to. There is a footman at the end of the passage. He has been there since 11. Mr. Renford instructed it. He does not yet know why. He does not need to know why. He needs only to hear me raise my voice." She had invented the footman. There was no footman. But Rennick did not know the house at night the way she did, and he did not know how far Mr. Renford trusted her, and he calculated the odds badly and lowered his hand. "Put the ledgers back," she said. "All of them, in the order you found them." He put them back. His hands were shaking. She did not enjoy watching them shake. She watched anyway, because she had learned that a man who was allowed to compose himself in a crisis learned nothing from it. "Now go to your room." He went. He passed her in the doorway and did not look at her. She locked the office door behind him with the key she had taken from its hook that afternoon, and she stood in the dark passage with her hand pressed flat against the wall and counted to 10, and then to 10 again, and then she went upstairs and woke the actual footman and asked him, very politely, to sit in the passage outside the estate office until dawn and to admit no one but Mr. Renford. He did not ask her why. He nodded once and went. In the morning Rennick was gone. His room was empty. His horse was gone from the stable. He had left a note on the desk in the estate office, addressed to Elias Renford, containing 3 sentences. The first denied any wrongdoing. The second resigned his post. The third asked that his final wages be sent to a hotel in Baltimore. Elias read the note and set it aside and looked across the desk at Mira, who had not slept and who was standing very straight with her hands folded in front of her. "He came for the books," she said. I stopped him. "I did not raise the house. He is not worth the noise. You should have raised the house. He would have been a fugitive. As it is, he is a coward, which is easier to reason with. He will surface within a week. He has an aunt in Baltimore who will not hide him for long. When he surfaces, we will send someone to speak with him. We will not need him to confess. We will need him to tell us who ordered him to open Marden and Sons." Elias considered her. His face was very still. She could not read it. She had been reading faces for a living for 7 years, and she could not read his. "Sit down, Miss Alcott." She sat. "You believe he was ordered. I do not believe a steward invents a supplier out of ambition. I believe he invented one out of instruction. The instruction did not come from you. It came from someone who could reach him and who benefited from the money. Say it. I do not have proof yet. Say it anyway. Your wife, sir, or her father, or both." He did not react. He had reached the same conclusion. He had reached it, she thought, before she had said the name. "Find the proof," he said. "Yes, sir." She rose to go. At the door he stopped her. "Miss Alcott." "Sir, when did you sleep last?" "The night before last." "Sleep now. The office will keep. So will the fraud. I would prefer you clear-headed." "Yes, sir." She went. She did not sleep. She sat at the window of her room and watched the mist rise off the river beyond the mill, and thought about the shape of the thing she was inside of, and about the fact that she was, for the first time in her adult life, standing on the ground she had actually built, and that the ground was holding. 3 weeks passed. The house learned, without being told, that Miss Alcott was to be treated as staff of a different order. Mrs. Falk began to send her tea in the office at 4, and to set a second cup on the tray without comment. The under-butler began to touch his forelock when she passed. The housemaids stopped calling her Mira in the corridors, and began to call her Miss Alcott, and the older of the two, a girl named Peg, who had been unkind for 4 years, brought her a pressed collar one morning and set it on the desk without a word. Camilla did not return. Her father did. He came twice in the 3rd week, and was received twice in the library, and left twice with his colour high. On the 2nd visit he brought a lawyer with him, a soft round man from Richmond with ink-stained fingers and a bad cough, who informed Elias that a petition had been prepared and would be filed in the County Circuit Court on the following Monday. The petition alleged that Elias Renford had, since the death of his brother, exhibited signs of unsound judgment culminating in the elevation of a household servant to a position of financial trust, and that a commission should be empanelled to inquire into his competence to manage his own affairs. Elias read the petition. He set it down. "I will see you in court, gentlemen," he said, on Monday. "Please do not visit again in the interim. It tires the horses." They left. He sent for Mira. She read the petition twice. She looked up. "They have moved faster than I expected," she said. "They have moved exactly as fast as their fear," he said. "Can you be ready by Monday?" "I have been ready for 19 months. Say what you need. I need the man Rennick. Alive and speaking. I need the receipts from the boarding house in Fredericksburg. I need one honest bank clerk. I need a solicitor of our own who will not flinch at the name Ashford. You will have them by Saturday. Then we will be ready by Monday." He held her look a moment longer than the moment required. He almost smiled. This one held for 2 full seconds and then was gone. "Miss Alcott," he said. "Sir, I have been meaning to say." The library is yours as long as you wish to use it. The books were my brother's, and he would have liked you. That is the closest thing to a compliment I know how to give. It is more than sufficient, sir." She went back to the office. She did not permit herself to think about the almost smile until she was alone. Then she permitted herself a single count of 10, and no more, and returned to her work. The Fredericksburg woman was found by Wednesday. She was a landlady of 60 who had, for a small monthly fee, been signing for a suite of letters addressed to Marden and Sons, and forwarding them to a private address in the county seat. The private address, when a boy was sent to observe it, proved to be a set of rooms above a milliner's shop that were leased in the name of a Miss Cordelia Ashford, unmarried sister of Camilla, who had never previously been known to concern herself with commerce of any kind. The landlady, presented with the alternative of a subpoena, agreed to travel to the county seat and testify to what she had signed for and when. She was paid her fare and her lost wages, and given a room at a respectable inn to wait. Rennick was found on Thursday, in Baltimore, in a boarding house within a quarter-mile of the aunt he had named in his note. He was not hiding. He was drinking, in a slow, methodical way that suggested a man who had already decided the worst had happened and was waiting for it to arrive. The solicitor Elias had engaged, a lean man named Prosper Havens, who had been at Yale with Elias's brother, and who owed the dead man a debt he had never been able to repay, sat with Rennick for 4 hours in a private parlour, and emerged with a signed statement of 11 pages. The statement did not implicate Camilla directly. It implicated her sister, Cordelia, who had approached Rennick 18 months earlier at a garden party, and had proposed the arrangement in terms he described as businesslike. It implicated Judge Ashford by inference. The money, once collected at the milliner's rooms, had been deposited in an account bearing the judge's initials at a small bank in Alexandria, an account into which no other funds flowed, and out of which sums were periodically withdrawn to pay off, Rennick believed, a series of gambling debts the judge had accumulated over a decade and had concealed from his family. Prosper Havens brought the statement to Renfield Hall on Saturday afternoon. He laid it on the library desk. He looked at Mira, who was seated at the desk with Elias standing behind her, and he inclined his head with the faint, precise courtesy of a man who had spent his career deciding whom to bow to. "Miss Alcott," he said. "Mr. Renford tells me the case is yours. I am at your disposal. Mr. Havens." "Thank you. Sit down. We have 36 hours and a great deal to arrange." He sat. She began to speak. She spoke for 2 hours without notes, and when she was finished he had filled 16 pages of his own notebook, and he looked up at her and said, quietly, "I have practised law for 22 years, Miss Alcott. I have not seen a case built cleaner than this. Where did you learn to think this way?" "In a scullery," she said. He almost laughed. He caught himself. "Forgive me," he said. "There is nothing to forgive. It is where I learned. There is no shame in the place. Only in the reason I was sent there." On Monday morning the courthouse in the county seat was full. Word had travelled, as word travels in small counties, that a Renford was being petitioned for by an Ashford, and that the petition would turn on the strange elevation of a housemaid to the running of the estate books. Farmers had ridden in from 12 miles out. Millwrights had left their looms. The gallery was standing room. Camilla Ashford sat in the front row, in dove grey, with her father beside her and her sister Cordelia on her father's other side, and the three of them looked, from a distance, like a portrait of family solidarity that had been posed too carefully to be true. Mira sat at the respondents' table beside Prosper Havens. She wore a plain dark dress that had been made for her the week before by a seamstress in the town whom Mrs. Falk had recommended. Her hair was pinned simply. Her hands were folded on the tin box in front of her. She had not been called by anyone that morning as Mira. She had been called Miss Alcott by the clerk of the court, by the bailiff, and by two farmers she had never met, who had touched their hats to her on the courthouse steps. The commission was chaired by a circuit judge named Halloran, who had been brought from an adjacent county specifically because he had no ties to the Ashfords. He read the petition aloud. He asked the petitioners to present their evidence of Elias Renford's alleged incompetence. Judge Ashford's Richmond lawyer rose and spoke for 40 minutes, and the substance of what he said was that a man who elevated a scullery maid to keep his books was a man whose judgment could not be trusted, and that the county had an interest in ensuring that the Renford estate was managed by someone whose reason had not been overturned by grief or by the peculiar attentions of a young woman of unknown provenance. When he sat down, Prosper Havens rose. "Your Honour," he said, "the respondent will demonstrate 3 things. First, that Miss Alcott's elevation was not an act of impaired judgment, but an act of long overdue justice. Second, that the estate has for 19 months been the victim of a systematic fraud, uncovered and documented by Miss Alcott and by no one else. Third, that the petitioners are themselves the authors of the fraud, and that this petition is not an inquiry into competence, but a manoeuvre to prevent exposure. The respondent will not call Mr. Renford as his first witness. He will call Miss Alcott." The gallery made a sound. Judge Halloran struck once with his gavel, and the sound stopped. Mira rose. She walked to the witness box. She was sworn. She sat. Havens began with the ledgers. She answered plainly. She named the entries. She named the dates. She named the sums. She read from her copies. She traced the money from the mill account to Marden and Sons, from Marden and Sons to the boarding house in Fredericksburg, from the boarding house to the milliner's rooms in the county seat, from the milliner's rooms to the bank in Alexandria. She named the account and the initials on it. She did not raise her voice. She did not editorialize. She spoke for 1 hour and 40 minutes, in short declarative sentences that a jury of farmers could follow, and did. When she was done, Havens called the landlady from Fredericksburg, who identified the letters she had signed for and the woman who had collected them. He called a clerk from the Alexandria Bank, who identified the account and the pattern of deposits and withdrawals. He called Prosper Rennick, who had been transported from Baltimore, and who was thin and shaking, and who read his statement aloud in a voice that carried no defiance and no dignity, but only the flat exhaustion of a man who had at last stopped calculating. Cordelia Ashford was weeping silently by the third witness. Judge Ashford was not. His face had gone the colour of tallow, and he was staring at the far wall with the fixed look of a man who had understood, some minutes before the room around him did, that he had lost the thing he had spent 30 years defending. Camilla did not weep. She sat straight and still and watched Mira and did not look away, and when the commission recessed for the noon meal she rose and walked directly to the respondent's table and stopped in front of it. Havens rose. Mira did not. "You have destroyed my family," Camilla said quietly. "No," Mira said. "Your family destroyed itself. I only wrote it down. You will not be forgiven for this. I have not asked to be. I have asked only to be believed. I am." Camilla stood a moment longer. Then she turned and left. The commission reconvened at 2. Judge Halloran did not require argument. He dismissed the petition against Elias Renford. He directed the county prosecutor to file criminal charges against Cordelia Ashford for fraud, and against Judge Bellwood Ashford for conspiracy and misappropriation. He directed Rennick to be held on a lesser charge as a cooperating witness. He commended Miss Mira Alcott from the bench for a piece of investigative bookkeeping that he described as, and here he consulted his notes to be sure of the word he wanted, exemplary. The gallery did not cheer. It had the sense not to. It filed out in a low murmur that carried Miss Alcott's name to the courthouse steps, and from the courthouse steps to the taverns, and from the taverns, by nightfall, to every farm within a day's ride. Elias found her in a small side room where she had gone to be alone for a moment. She was sitting on a bench with her hands in her lap. She was not crying. She had not cried at any point in the last hour, nor in the last month, nor in the last 4 years, but there was a fine tremor along her forearms that she had not been able to quiet, and she was waiting for it to pass. Miss Alcott. Mr. Renford, I have 3 things to say to you, and I would prefer to say them here rather than in the corridor. Please. He sat down on the bench beside her, not close, at the distance a stranger would sit. He looked straight ahead. First, I owe you the apology I said I would earn the right to offer. I offer it now. I did not see you for 4 years. I should have. I did not, because I had decided the house did not require seeing. I was wrong. I regret it. I will regret it for the rest of my life, whether you accept the apology or not. So I ask you to accept it for your own comfort and not for mine. I accept it, sir. Second, the estate office is yours, not as bookkeeper, as manager, in your own name. The title will be registered on Monday. Your wage will be the wage the post commands. I will consult with you on all matters of substance, and I will not overrule you on matters of the books. Do you accept? I accept. Third, he paused. He looked at his hands. He was not a man who had practised this kind of sentence. I would like, when a decent interval has passed, and my present marriage is dissolved as it will be, to ask you a question I have no right to ask now. I will not ask it now. I only wish you to know that I intend to ask it, so that if the intention is unwelcome you may say so, and I will not raise it again. She was quiet for a long moment. The tremor in her forearms had stopped. She looked at her own hands, which were folded in her lap, and then at his, which were folded on his knee, and then at the wall opposite them, which was painted the colour of old cream, and had a water stain in the shape of a leaf. It is not unwelcome, she said. That is enough for now. Yes, thank you. Yes, they sat a moment longer. He did not touch her hand. She did not touch his. She was aware, very precisely, of the distance between his sleeve and hers, and she counted it, without meaning to, at 4 inches. And she thought that 4 inches was, for the moment, the correct distance, and that any smaller distance would come when it came, and would be earned, and that this was, of everything that had happened in the last month, the thing she was most certain of. He rose. He offered her his arm. She took it. They walked out of the side room and down the courthouse corridor together, and the people who were still standing in the corridor made a path for them without being asked. And Mrs. Fulk, who had come to town on the mail coach that morning without telling anyone, and who had been standing at the back of the gallery for the whole of the proceedings, met them at the door and said only, to Mira finally, and turned and walked ahead of them down the steps. 6 years later, on a bright September afternoon, a woman named Mira Renford stood on the front steps of the new schoolhouse she had built at the edge of her land, and watched 41 children file inside for the first day of the autumn term. The schoolhouse was a plain brick building with tall windows and a slate roof, and it had been built with money from the mill accounts, which she had run in her own name for the whole of those 6 years, and it was called simply the Alcott School after the name she had been born with and had kept, in the deed and on the sign, when she married the man who now stood beside her on the steps. The children were the children of tenant farmers and mill workers and shopkeepers, and, in 3 cases, of the household servants of Renfield Hall. 2 of them were the daughters of Peg, the housemaid who had once been unkind, and who had wept the day the school opened, and had not been able to say why. 1 was the son of Prosper Havens, who had moved his practice to the county seat the year after the trial, and who now handled the estate's legal work and much of the county's besides. The oldest of them, a serious dark-haired boy of 11, who was to be the school's first monitor, was the son of Cordelia Ashford, who had served 2 years in the county jail, and had emerged, and had, after a period of some months in which no one in the county would speak to her, presented herself at the door of Renfield Hall one rainy afternoon, with her son beside her, and had asked, in a voice she had never used before in her life, whether the school would take him. Mira had said yes. She had said it without pausing to consult anyone. She had said it because a child was a child, and because Cordelia's face in the rain had been the face of a person who had finally understood a thing, and because Mira had learned, in the years since the trial, that a woman who had won could afford to be exact rather than triumphant. Judge Ashford had died in prison in the 2nd year. Camilla had gone abroad and had, according to letters that reached the county once or twice a year, made a quiet second life in a small French town, where no one had heard her father's name. She had written to Mira once, a short note in a hand that had shaken slightly, containing only the sentence, "I was afraid of you because you were more than I could ever be, and I was too small to bear it." Mira had read the note twice, and had placed it in the tin box with the old invoice copies, because she had come, over the years, to believe that a box that had once held proof of wrongdoing might as well also hold proof of the moment a wrong person had begun, however late. To see herself. Rennick had been released after 18 months, and had gone west, and no one had heard of him again, and Mira found, when she thought of him at all, that she wished him only the ordinary luck of an ordinary man. Mrs. Falk had died in the spring of the 4th year. She had been laid in the churchyard at the edge of the estate, under a stone that Mira had chosen, and that read only, "She held our heads up." The under-butler had retired to a cottage near the mill. Peg was now the housekeeper. The house ran on paper still, and the paper still ran on trust, and the trust, everyone in the county now understood, ran through the estate office at Renfield Hall, where a woman with steady hands sat at a desk that had once belonged to a half-blind old bookkeeper named Josiah Penn, and kept the accounts of the largest estate east of the river, and the school at its edge, and the 6 tenant farms that had been added to the estate in the years since the trial, and that were now, without fanfare, held in her name and not her husband's, at his own insistence and at the county's grudging respect. Elias stood beside her on the schoolhouse steps and watched the last of the children file in. He did not speak. He had grown in the 6 years into a man who spoke less than he had used to, and who smiled more, though the smile was still small and still slow to arrive. He turned to her now, and the smile arrived and stayed. "Mrs. Renford," he said. "Missy Renford, you have built a school. We have built a school. You have built a school. I paid for the bricks. There is a difference," she said. "There is." She looked out across the yard, where the last child had disappeared through the door, and where the September light was falling in long slats across the packed earth. She thought for a moment of the corridor at Renfield Hall 6 years earlier, and of a tray of broken porcelain, and of a woman on a landing screaming a sentence that had, in the end, emptied a house of everything that did not belong in it, and had left, standing on the marble, a woman with a bound thumb and a spine and a name. She had not once asked to be seen. She had simply become impossible to overlook. She had not been rescued. She had not been managed. She had not been a charity. She had been a bookkeeper, and then a manager, and then a wife, and then a founder in that order, and she had chosen each of them from sufficiency and not from need. That was the whole of it. And it was enough. And it was everything. If her steadiness carried you, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments the exact moment you knew Elias had finally seen her, and the city you are watching from, because I want to see how far this quiet woman's story travels. Another one is waiting for you next.